Prof. Greetings,
Greetings.
everybody. We are on week 6 of Art Saturday. My name is Zippo Daile. I'm the curator and host of the sessions, and I'm also here with my colleagues who are the creators of the program and who are also producers and directors of a film series called South African Arts Past and Present, which we've been screening every week since we started in, and our very last session will be on December 2. We hope that you will get the chance to join us for those sessions, for the rest of the sessions. For those that are joining us for the very first time, Art Saturday is a weekly online art education program which is aimed at arts and culture teachers, artists, community arts facilitators, as well as art students. And in the past workshops that Art Ubuntu has held throughout the country, there have been a lot of concerns from the teachers that they didn't have material to teach students, especially material about artists from South Africa. And so Abdulcadir, Ahmed Said, Bridget Thompson, and the late Dingan Kapa went on a journey of documenting 15 artists, not only artists, but also various topics like conversations on jazz. And after that, they've created workbooks to accompany all these this beautiful film series. And so Art Saturday is also another way of activating and also inviting teachers to also be part of these sessions. What we do also is we have a little form that will pop up on the chat box. There's a chat box on the side. Bravusi has already greeted everyone. He's greeted Lefifitladi, he's greeted Phitika Ntuli on the chat box on the side. You might have your private messages there, so don't be afraid to just explore Zoom and click on the chat box. If you want to write something, you're welcome to write something, but we would really like to hear your voices also. If you would like to say something, you can, you get a chance towards the end of the presentation to say something. You can put up your hand. There's a button there we can click to put up your hand if you'd like to, or you can just, say, Zippo, hey, I need to say something. So you have a chance to speak during the sessions. So this afternoon, this session is a little bit different to the sessions that we usually host, because we usually start with one of the films, right? And then we'll end the discussion after. But today we do not have a film, really. We are introducing a manuscript called The Hidden Thread of South African Visual Heritage by the Art and Ubuntu Trust. Two of the contributing four writers are here. Bridget Thompson is here. She wrote contributed to the manuscript, as well as Ihubo Lengabadi, an artist formerly known as Bonelo Ntuli, is also here in the house, ceramic artist from Durban. He's returning again. We screened a film of his a couple of weeks ago on his practice as a ceramic artist, and he also joins us today as a speaker who contributed to the manuscript. I will hear from them a little bit later. I'd also like to welcome our guest speakers. We have some honorable guest speakers today. I don't know if this lady has walked in already. She's an artist educator and the former director of arts in College of Humanities and Sciences. Professor Nombeko Mphako should be here in the house at some point. And we also have Lifetime Achievement Literary Award winner for 2023, poet, sculptor, teacher, Professor Phitika Ntuli. Congratulations and welcome to ArtSAT. I'm not going to speak very much. I'm just going to welcome you and then we'll jump into the program. It's an honor to have all of you visual art royalties in the house this Saturday. It's a very busy time of the year for a lot of people. We're very grateful that you were able to grace us with your presence today. What we'll do before we jump into the discussions is that we will play a video, right? This it's not a Ubuntu video. We had to, go into the interwebs to get something that would probably help us, that would like to help us, ease into the discussion. This guy, his name is Ron Eglash. He's gonna play a little presentation that he did, about a 16-minute presentation on the fractals. It's called the Fractals at the Heart of African Designs. And thereafter, I'm going to ask Bridget Thompson, who wrote an introduction on the book, to come and speak a little bit about what the book is about. And also, she would introduce Phitika and Professor Mphako, and then we'll go. Thank you to artist Abdulcadir for being here. He's also going to be part of our guests, spontaneous guests, also after when we return from the film screening. I hope, Yonelisa, you have your film ready. We go straight to the film, and then we're going to come back and talk. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And a really great welcome to the special artists who are with us today. I can see in front of me on the screen, I can see Lefifi, and I can see Ihubo Langabadi. I'm used to calling you Sponello. It's going to take me a while to call you Ihubo Langabadi. And Professor Phitika and Ntuli and Professor Nombeko and Mphako, thank you so much for being with us today. And I'd like to just mention the specialness of our two speakers in terms of their own work, which really taps into the themes and our two special visitors, Lefifi and Ihubo. Professor Phitika and Ntuli did this extraordinary exhibition during COVID called Azibuyela Emasisweni, Return to the Source. And just yesterday, I was looking through the catalogue of an exhibition that Professor Mphako did, where I discovered that she uses patterns very similar to what the speaker was talking about. So it's really great to have practitioners. And then, of course, Lefifi's work, taps into ritual, which is another part of the discussion which is important for us. And Ihubo Langabadi's work, well, it's just words don't describe it. But I'd like to kick off immediately with a brief description of the manuscript, the book. It's called The Hidden Thread of South Africa's Indigenous Visual Heritage. And it's part of a series of 3 books that we've produced. One was launched in ArtSAT in 2021, Listening to Literature. And the last one is called Defining South African Music, where we use the voices of musicians to try and understand what is Marabi, what is Kwela, and so on. But in this one, we were on a quest to try and respond to a question that Ernest Mangoba posed, and that was, what are we leaving on the way of this so-called progress? And I'd like to immediately respond to the session that we've just heard on mathematics. I don't know how clear it was for all of you. Zipo did explain how tricky it was to get a quality version, but when I first saw it, it was a really exciting introduction to the idea of knowledge that's embedded in indigenous visual art. And through our work, we've come to think of indigenous visual art as first system art. The Tanzanian artist and critic and writer Eben Nicodemus has developed a very beautiful, I'm sorry, I'm saying a lot, has developed, I was a little bit thrown by my computer not working again. She's developed a beautiful analysis of art, starting from her own experience of going to study in Sweden and going to study anthropology, and feeling that the study of anthropology was objectifying her, and she gave it up and became an artist, and over many years developed her theory and understanding of art, in which she argues that there is a fully fledged system of art in Africa before the colonial system comes. And she starts to speak about two systems of art. So I think it's valid in the South African context to talk about a first system of art. We see it in beadwork, we see it in basketware, we see it in the fractal patterns, in so many aspects of design. And it is absolutely manifest in the work of many of our contemporary artists, although it's not clear in the discourse yet. So what we were trying to do with this publication, The Hidden Thread of South Africa's Indigenous Visual Heritage, is say, what is this? What is this knowledge? Where does it come from? How does it exist? What does it mean for us in art today? What does it mean for us in knowledge? So I'd like to just briefly read something which picks up on this question, and say one of the many issues resulting from the ways in which the first system of art is misunderstood is that significant intersections between art knowledge and mathematical knowledge are woefully neglected in our knowledge-broking institutions, our schools, our universities, and our media. And everybody knows the typical response of a parent: oh, you want to study art, why don't you want to do something more practical? And I think the TED Talk really demonstrates how profoundly practical art is. And I also stand in awe not only of art's practical dimensions, but also art's enormous power, symbolic power, and spiritual power. But just to go back to the practical dimensions again, and what it could mean for us if we were to tap into the mathematical knowledge that we do know exists in the first system art. And we do know that first system art still exists in some cases in its pure form in South Africa, and in some cases as the hidden thread in many practicing artists' work. But for example, the Indian example of tapping into mathematical principles in early spiritual texts suggests the possibilities for Africa by crossing the disciplines of the Western paradigm and usefully deploying indigenous mathematical knowledge embedded in indigenous practices in Africa. There's potential for this knowledge to contribute to development in Africa as well. And the fact that modern India was able to call upon ancient India's knowledge of algorithms, because the particular techniques of calculation not only originated in the Vedic texts in ancient India, but like other Indian mathematical knowledge was also an integral part of its culture, cannot be unconnected to India's outstanding achievements in computer technology. This is quoting from a Caribbean writer on the question of development and why development needs to tap into the indigenous knowledge in every society and into the culture in every society. And in that sense, our art is extraordinarily important for us if we are to solve our problems as a society. Peter Clark, who was a member of the Art and Ubuntu Trust Advisory Board, and another elder who guided the Trust's work, shared his insights with us. He said, I remember reading an article a few years ago about a performance of Bush music in Germany, where this German composer said that he was fascinated by the structure of Bushman music because he was also a mathematician. And so he looked at it from that point of view. He said that there was so much he still had to find out, as sophisticated, as advanced as German culture was. He was looking at the primitive and found that the primitive was so sophisticated that he, the sophisticated man, still had to learn. And what we find often in the background of artists who are described as untrained is that there's a significant family member who was an artist steeped in indigenous knowledge and philosophy. And one example thoughtfully described by Bongiwe Hlekiso in her a master's thesis on Goddess Mngudlandlu is how Mngudlandlu was tutored by her grandmother. And another is lessons drawn by Mangoba from his mother's work as a ceramic artist, and the purpose of the Mbongi, or praise poet, to speak the unspeakable and say the unsayable, which she shared with him. So most artists do not enter into the contemporary system as tabula rasa, clean slates, with no prior knowledge of art or its role in society. The problem, again, is this question of the discourse. But when we set out to do this work, like the German composer, we found we had to rethink a lot of our preconceptions and accept our own ignorance while searching for understanding of South Africa's indigenous visual heritage as art. And we grew to appreciate that an ancient, subtle, and sophisticated indigenous visual heritage is a vital but misunderstood, even denied force in the discourse on contemporary South African art. So our journey began with Ernest Mangoba, and my contribution to this book is called Following Mangoba's Trail, and it describes how, first of all, starting with looking at his work and trying to understand what was the meaning of the patterning in his work, because he would speak about pre-industrial art having a certain harmony that he felt was missing in modern art, and in his works you find these equal patterns of elements, and we began to understand that this is something to do with Ubuntu. A person is a person by and because of other people. And if you look at the beginning of our at our website, you'll see that's kind of expressed visually through beads as well. This photograph was taken by Abdulcadir when we were filming, and it really expresses that question of what are we leaving on the way of so-called progress. But anyway, so just to continue as to how we tried to solve the puzzles really that Ernest Mangoba posed for us. And so the first one was to understand that patterning element, and then to understand that there was storytelling within his paintings, and that storytelling was related to the colors and the meanings of beadwork from the different regions of South Africa. And it was so remarkable yesterday when I was reading through Professor Mphako's work with her students and how she encourages them to work with visual narratives rooted in language, because we know how much philosophy is coded into indigenous languages. And so that storytelling and that narrative thing came together. And in some of his other works, you can also begin to see perhaps the expression of ritual, which again taps into Lefifi Tladi's work. And the other thing that we discovered that we had some kind of sense of was this relationship with beadwork, but it was really informed when we traveled around the country and we invited indigenous artists to join the various workshops we were having. And one of them looked at some the posters we had of Ernest Mangoba's work and said, oh, this one's Ndebele, this one's Xhosa colors, this one's Zulu colors. By the way, this photograph that you're seeing is when we were filming. You'll see Dingaan, to whom all these films is dedicated, on the right there with the blue cap. And we were filming Elizabeth Makahani, who featured a ceramic artist who featured in an earlier set of ArtSAT. And she showed us many aspects of how she collected the clay and the songs that she sang and the messages to the ancestors and so on while she was doing it, and so on. It was a very powerful encounter. She also had a kind of interesting critique of the market as well. But going back to Ernest Mangoba, so having realized that there was more than this patterning in his work and that more than this storytelling in his work, we were then in Gemsbokspreet in former Kwandebele in what is now Mpumalanga province. And the woman who was lecturing us on Ndebele art started to explain the colors. And as we looked at the colors, we began to understand that's us as we traveled around. You can see in the top of the thing, you'll see the Bushman artist whose name was Patat. And out of the picture is Peter Clark. Peter Clark was actually sort of talking to him. And in the middle left-hand side, you see Mrs. Msiza, who in fact gave this remarkable lecture on colors in Ndebele art, which we then related to one of Ernest Mandelber's pictures. And we could see through the meaning that she ascribed to the different colors, and it's exactly this one. It's exactly this one. And if we could begin to read it as a story about 76. If you look at the bottom right, you'll see a very vague and abstracted picture of, it could be Hector Peterson being carried. And when you go through the meaning of the colors that she ascribed, it basically was a lament for the children of 76. And then we looked down and we saw the signature. There was Ernest Mandelber 76. It was quite incredible to make that connection. So as we traveled and learnt, we began to realize that also the terminology that's used to talk about art in South Africa doesn't really cover what we need it to cover. There's too much talk of tribal art, traditional art. And why does African art have to be described as traditional? Why is Nesta Nala, who was always described as a crafter, a highly appreciated crafter, but somebody she taught certain methods to, would then exhibit in a gallery and be described as an artist, and that person happened to be white and she was black, and so she was a crafter and he was an artist. But why was she any less contemporary and inspired by traditions in African art than, say, William Kentridge, who was inspired by traditions in European art? Why should there be that distinction? And doesn't such a distinction do a disservice to both artists? And another contradiction we found is that so much art is held in beadwork and ceramics, basketware. It's held and appreciated in our museums and galleries. But the people who produce that today are not called artists, although the work of their ancestors is kept in museums and galleries and called art. So that was another contradiction. That's another contradiction in the language and in the terminology and in our understanding, which has huge ramifications for how we relate to the artists in our society. And the other thing that we discovered as we traveled is how much work there is. There's extraordinary amount of work which is held in basements and archives and vaults in our galleries around the country. And at the same time, Professor Ntuli once mentioned to me that Creda Mutwa had mentioned to him that he'd been able to go to the basement of the British Museum, and he said if that work came back, it would heal our society. And equally, I think we also need to come to terms with what we do already have in our museums and galleries so that we can understand it and bring it out, bring its full richness out into society. Perhaps it doesn't work on its own because very often it has a meaning in terms of a larger ritual and a larger practice within society. But at least I think we do need to start asking those questions about how we understand what does exist. So of course this also raises the question of reparations and what should happen to the art and how should it come back and how do we understand it coming back. And I've heard that in Mali, they allow the art out of the museums for rituals, and then it comes back in again, which is a very interesting way of handling that question. But before we can even have that debate, and that debate is hot and happening in Europe, we need to start talking to each other about what we do have and what it means to us, and we need to really go far beyond the terms of tribal and traditional to have a deeper understanding of it. There's much more to say, and our learning continues to unfold. Suffice to say that it's been an extraordinarily rich experience. One of the things we try to do and try incessantly to do is to knock on the doors of the Department of Basic Education and the Department of Higher Education and Training. We really do have a very hard time getting through to them about the importance of art. Although the teachers who come to the workshops that we attend say, well, art is just like maths, it teaches problem-solving thinking. So somehow or other, we need a kind of massive publicity campaign to impact hearts and minds about this extraordinary discipline called art, which we're so rich in South Africa, and which we're not taking account of, and which we're not giving enough attention to, and which we're not cherishing and nurturing the way we should. And I think with that, I'd like to close and hand over to Zippo and to our speakers for today.
Thank you, Bridget. I was thinking we will go straight to Professor Ntuli. Since we're running out of time, we have about 4 speakers and almost at the top of the hour. So I thought I would hand in to Professor Phitika Ntuli, followed by Professor Nombeko Mphako, and then come back to me. That's okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Prof. Yes. Could you also please switch on your camera is on? Eh? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, please. I say thank you, very much to Bridget and the TED, talk that was speaking of fractals. I would like to, speak to the issue of, fractals. But for me, fractals and love. Here's a poem. The mesmerizing tapestry of intricate patterns unfolding before our eyes. A glimpse into nature's hidden depth in its infinite complexity that reveals the beauty of self-similarity, a recursive dance that echoes through the universe of our collective dreams. From the grandeur of mountain ranges to the delicate ferns, fronds, fractals emerge, repeating their elegant motif. As they do, I catch your smile. In the depth of a snowflake or a branching of a tree, as you weave your enchanting spell, a language of shapes and proportions, captivating our senses, inviting us to explore the infinite intricacies of our existence. And as we delve into the depth of fractal realms of our love, I discover a world of infinite detail and infinite possibility, a glimpse into the underlying fabric of the reality of our love. I trace the question of the hidden, threads of, African art from a perspective of, colonialism that decided to negate everything that African people were doing. But I'd like to start by quote Valentin Madimbe, in his book, The Invention of Africa, that the TED talk quoted. He says, until now, Western interpreters as well as African analysts have been using categories and conceptual systems which depend on Western epistemological order. Does it mean that African traditional systems of thought are unthinkable and cannot be made explicit within the framework of their own rationality? We'll pick that up later. But then, Ivan Wagner has something to say, which to me catches me. The societies and cultures of Africa have long been considered through a sign of closure and immutability. Our arts contracted into the rigid space of classification and consigned them to immobility within the confines of a static mannered otherness, What we would like to suggest here instead is a reading of African art under the sign of openness, the sign of complexity, the sign of openness to encounter and change. We will not present it under the sign of permanence, but of transition. So in other words, in the realm of visual arts, African heritage is often characterized by its bold use of colors, intricate geometric patterns, symbolic representation, storytelling. Traditional mass beadwork, ceramics, basketry, paintings, and sculptures reflect the diverse spiritual beliefs and ancestral reverence of our own communities. In other words, textiles also play a significant role in African visual heritage, which each region boasting of its own unique weaving techniques and designs that showcase vibrant and intricate patterns. You look at the Ndebele art, you look at the Basotho wall painting arts. When you look at, I grew up in a village when I was little. My aunt will get in cow dung and then to put the cow dung on the floor because cow dung drives away flies. And as they move with the hand like this, patterns unfold. A number of patterns, almost like fractals. The TED speaker said, African people are using fractals, but we can't say so, because the fractals have only been discovered now. But African, people have discovered those, fractals, long ago. So it takes us to another, issue of it. Briefly referred to the issue of, storytelling. The storytelling in Ernest Mangoba's way, I was looking actually at that picture. I was seeing, designs and things that I can relate to real life. In my own work, where I said, as the return to the source, the revival, it is because we wanted to go back to that world where we used our own mathematics. We used everything, not because we got it from anybody else. We are here speaking on the platform of art and Ubuntu. What is Ubuntu? Ubuntu is just one thing: interconnectedness, interrelationship, interdependence, which speaks to us of quantum mechanics. You go to language. In my language, time is isikati, space is unkati. The root is one, so there's no space and time, but the space-time, continuum. All of these things are in them. Here is Lififi there. Lififi will tell you that in Africa, you don't add up to 10. You add up to 4, 5, 6, 7. You symbolize. 8 and 9, you subtract. 10, you resolve. You can do it in Sepedi. You can do it in isiZulu. You've got one phone. I'll add that one. It's a Sepedi. You add another one. It's a taru. Add another. Immediately you said hlanu. You are no longer talking wahlanu hela. And then when you speak about the 6 here, you are crossing. Super, you are indicating. Robedi -2, Robo -1, 10 you resolve. So that all of these hidden philosophical ideas, hidden ideas of art that are actually embedded, where people see craft and just simply designed and not actually see see art, it is a blindness of the Western world that speak to that. But let me say that in my conclusion, that when we look at, say, my own work, there's a lot of storytelling in my work. I've got an exhibition called as Buyena Masisweni, 45 bone bead sculptures, each one with a poem, with 33 people who collaborated on it. But when you look at these 45 pieces, there's only one form that dominates, because I use elephant ribs So you see all of these, ribs, when you look at them, they're almost like fractals. They move from one place to another. But when you look at that rib, when you put a rib in front of a woman, it symbolizes the pregnancy. You put it down on it, it's a boat. It is the crescent moon going to fetch water. You stand it on its edge here, it is a bow where you can play music or you can have a bow and arrow. You hold it by these things, muntu wamarumo. You return actually to the source, it becomes a boomerang. So all of these hidden signs and hidden symbolisms in African art, which Western art cannot deal with. So in other words, we need to go back to who we really are and also get to the source of the issues so that we can know that in Dogon, Dade, the goddess of Dade, made matter out of a spider's web, just like Athena, and Nate in it, how women played that kind of critical roles in it. And women are mostly the people who are going to do beadwork, who are going to do these things. So the issue of sexism again, hide the very threads of art. I rest my case.
Thank you, Professor. I can see Pranifip is itching there, but we'll get back to you very soon. Let's go to Professor Mphako.
Hi, colleagues. Good afternoon. How are you? Can you hear me?
Well, thank you, Prof. Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah. So from my side, the issue of African art versus Western art, I actually feel that we have to teach the up-and-coming artists, which is our children, to be bold about being Africans, to be bold about showcasing their being Africans, being all the issues of Ubuntu. So in my methodology, I've applied that I'm using for my students. I say to a student, before you can start solving the problems of the world, you must start by solving your own problems, by making art that can talk to yourself and talk to your people. For example, I always make an example that your grandmother from Neleni, Libote, or Mushwa, who has never been to school, when he sees your artwork, must be able to relate to that. Because before you can address the other people, the other nations, first address your own nation. Hence, Bridget was mentioning earlier on that I've taught my students to use metaphors. Because now when you combine metaphors with the art, you are actually also now combining the visuals with the language. Because visual language is exactly the same as the language that we use. So in my teaching, I combine these metaphors where I teach the language so that our children that are going to model schools and are growing up in modern society, they must understand. Because now when our children go to school, they are taught in English, and they will never be white, they can never be English. And then you find that as a result, they miss a lot of genuine cultural values that they would have learned if they were being taught in the way. Of course, the whole issue of being undermined, our epistemology being undermined, but we had a very genuine and valuable and good epistemology. Even if it was not written, it was told stories. Like, for example, in one of the catalogs that I sent to Bridget, I was talking about that the issue of teaching in our culture, we were taught by observing the nature. We were taught by observing the animal kingdoms. As a result, we have a lot of metaphors that talk to the animal kingdom, because this is how we're teaching. We're teaching our children. That is empirical, because they were observing these things. They were talking about the things that they see in everyday's life. So I think for us to be able to move on as Africans is to teach our up and coming generations to first value their own roots, to value their own Africanism, to value their own principles, in order for them to be able to defend it. Because even in academia, if we are not able to teach our students to emulate where they are coming from, like you say, if you don't know where you come from, then you don't know who you are. So basically, I would pledge that let's always teach our children and up and coming artists first to know themselves, know their root, in order for us to be able, because there's a lot that the world can learn from us. For example, the Dennis Ekpo, the Nigerian philosopher, is misunderstood by many white philosophers, because when he's saying that let's leave the barbaric ways of life and move on, is not actually saying let's look back in our Africanism. Is saying let's look at the valuable principles that makes us Africans, and then discard those. When you start talking about de-Africanism, discard those that are not important. For example, for before I close, he's talking about, I mean, issues of gender-based violence and patriarchy. Sorry, colleagues. Hello?
Apologies. I think, yes, we can hear you. I think someone probably, can you please mute yourself, Kimang Mfundo? Please mute your microphones.
My microphone.
Fundo, I think it's yours.
Let me check. I'm not sure.
Yes, please mute. Where you see the mic, please click there and it will mute.
Okay, so I was saying in conclusion is what Dennis Ekpo is talking about. Is talking about issues of cannibalism, like for example the killing of albinism. I mean, if we are now observing human rights, even if that thing was done and there was a reason for it, the ukutwala, which is the forced marriages, the killing of ugly women in rural areas because they are ugly and they are called witches, the gender-based violence is also part of those. So when we are looking at this, let's look at which ones of these values that don't make us who we are and that don't fit in our current society, and discard them. But it does not mean that we should not be Africans. Thank you.
Professor, I'd like to take it back to the book and to Ihubo Lengabadi, who was here a week ago. Smonelo?
Yebo.
Sawubona.
Oh, sanibona and greetings to everyone present. There's so much to say with such little time, and thank you for those who contributed already, and they've said so much that I also wanted to say, to touch on. But what I believe that we need to understand as humans is that we are gods having a human experience, and therefore our knowledge and what we do does not necessarily come from us, but it is channeled through us from the archaic knowledge. So that is why sometimes you find that we create things that are out of our control, and we ourselves cannot really explain what it really means. I explain this by making one example that in my understanding, a god or umdali, whatever language you want to call umdali, whether a male or a female, but God is unknown and unknowable. that therefore means that we will create things that may seem, I don't know, for the lack of a better word, may be confusing or may not be understood by many, even by us ourselves, because sometimes you create something out of you sleep and you dream, or you get influenced, like Dr. One of the participants just mentioned that you create something through certain experiences that you go through. Sometimes you find that you observe you what this the presenter the presenter of the video that was playing was trying to show. There is a guy here in South Africa who does that at this particular moment. It is Dr. Zulu Matabo Zulu. He explains it using a Sotho Tswana or Pedi cosmology. He explains it in such that you get to understand that we somehow need to come back to our own so that we understand ourselves even better. We don't necessarily need to rely on other ideologies or concepts in order for us to understand our own, because at this very moment there is so much confusion among especially the youth, because they lack proper teaching or tuition, if I may put it that way. That is because in these days we no longer have people who are invested in teaching about indigenous or not, yeah, I don't want to use the word tradition because I mean it has other negative connotations. We There is so much that is in our culture that is not put out there, but you'd find that people from other continents, Europe or America, they come to Africa as teachers, learn from people like Nyastanala or whoever else who practice in whatever medium that they practice in, learn from that particular person, go back and become doctors. What then happens to the people that they learn from? What are they if they are now doctors because they learn from the people who are not regarded as doctors, but they gave them something that they never knew about? So this is a matter of I'm just posing a question to all of us and to everyone who's listening, that it is not okay for us to go looking for other foreign to go to go elsewhere for knowledge instead of coming to Africa and learn from our own and try to invest in our knowledge system so that we instill proper education to the youth and to all of humanity, because it is very clear that many people from different countries, they do come to Africa to study and then go back with that knowledge and present it, and perhaps you'd find that some don't even acknowledge those who taught them, but they take things as if it is their own. In closing, what people, I mean, particularly African did was, I don't know how to put this. Some of the signs and symbols, like a secular form symbol, it symbolizes so many things in so many different ways. But in one simple way in which we could explain it, is that it's a symbol of unity. Like you'd see perhaps when you go to farmlands, when you sit around the roundabout, where everyone is equal to everybody, and the intentions there is so that we all feel equal, and we could engage in a manner that does not make one inferior than the other. So I don't know whether I'm making any sense, but that is where I would like to leave it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Hubo. You always make sense, my brother. You raised a question there. Hopefully, others will follow. I'm just trying to keep time also. I would like to have everyone be able to present before we can pose questions or respond to each other. And Dadeli Fifi always speaks about the decolonization of perception. Can you please come in and elaborate about that, Dadeli Fifi?
Yeah, hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
You clear?
I think the most important thing about this decolonization of perception is that, you know, we have been ruined by colonialism and we need to reorientate ourselves. And I would like to start with this thing here of painting, because painting has always been a thing that was done by women. And as we can see all over Africa, that the painters were the women. And even when you look at the cave paintings, you know, that again, with false perception and mal-education, because they are called Bushman cave paintings, we always think that actually it was the men who were painting these walls in the caves, you know, and it is not true. It was the women who painted these things, you know, and not the men, because you can imagine a guy is been hunting and chasing antelopes for 60 kilometers, come back home, and then in the evening in this dark cave, start painting. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And the important thing is when you look at that these paintings are as fresh as yesterday when you look at them. Now imagine the chemistry that is involved in the mixture of these glues and blood and chemicals. And I mean, so we had this fantastic women who are chemists. And you can see as we talk about this Ndebele paintings that even Ndebele now has become even a female word. And the funny thing is that Bo OC Esther, you know, have been given doctorates, but they're not featuring in any of the schools. I mean, where we should be having Bona, Bo Esther, and Bo Noria Mabasa heading departments in these things. But again, you know, we haven't decolonized nothing, you know. And my closing is we cannot decolonize by using colonial systems, you know. So I think our time is really pressed. And I think we need to have these discussions going on at least 5 hours, like in those days of apartheid. Thank you.
Thank you, Padre Fifi. Abdulcadir. Yes, we have time for you, Abdulcadir. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. I hope that you can see me. But
yes, we can.
Okay, but thank you. What I would like to tell you is I want to provoke us. My specialty is provocation. Today there is a young generation of writers and artists that they say whatever happened in Africa is not Africans, but they are extraterrestrial who made it. The pyramids was built by extraterrestrial. What do you call it? The fractional, there was extraterrestrial. Why those Aboriginal people, they didn't have the brain to think about in those terms. So now there are a lot of people who believe in cinema, in writing, in painting, and all these things. And decolonization cannot be effective unless the educational system is compartmentalized. There is no a broader knowledge, but it's a compartmentalized knowledge system. So what that means that psychology and sociology, they are not interlinked. Each one has a branch of its own. When it comes to art, when as what do you call it? What amazes me is when I went to Eastern Cape, we were filming, and I hear that there are 16 different shades of red. And the young boy who grows up in that notion, he comes here to study at this university, or what I call a center of miseducation. And he's told that only there is one red, and it's a Titian red. What will happen to the psychic of that young boy or that future artist? That's something that we have to understand. So it's a compartmentalization that creates havoc in the psychic of the people. And it's not only what do you call it that, but also something very strange and funny when you are considered primitive. You are positioned in a position of primitivism. And that is what I call when the European, I want to provoke them, I call them, they are in need to satisfy the needs of primitivism. So when they're going back to the source of knowledge, I will tell them, you are looking for a sense of satisfying the needs of primitivism. And they laugh and they become ashamed, but they cannot know how to respond to it. And coming back to what do you call it, Uhubu, what he says, that is it comes to you. You have to realize that the DNA is not only who we are to define us who we are and where we come, but it holds also our knowledge system. Is the accumulation, is the central library of our knowledge system. So it evokes in you and your sensibility and the artists, what they have that, it evokes in them that historical aspect of the tradition and cultural value of the person. Although he tries to suppress, sooner or later, in a brutal form, that will come out. So that is what I want to tell you. Thank you. And sorry for disturbing you and provoking you.
Don't be sorry, Abdulcadir. We still have some time for questions. This is a part of the program where we take questions from the floor. We've heard from all our presenters. Sorry, my camera is off. We've heard from all our presenters. We have very few. We can take in at least 2 questions before we close. There's also a form on the chat box. If you could kindly help us with that form, if you could fill in that form. It's basically us needing feedback from you, who's the audience, to find out how useful are these sessions, how were they useful for you, because we're also trying to create more material to take into, to share with the teachers and community art facilitators. So we'd appreciate if you could fill in the form. But if there aren't any questions, I will take another round from the floor.
I would like.
Ifubo, you have hands, they clapping, or you have your hands up?
I wanted to make a comment.
Yes. Yes, you can go ahead. I'm not quite sure who's talking, but you can go ahead, please.
No, it's me, Lififi.
Hi, Papa.
Yeah, Baba, I'm cool. No, I wanted to add some other important factor. When the young Potter was talking about issues of class, you know, that one of the important things I will always remember, I was with a very good friend of mine in Moscow there, and he was playing chess all night and kicking ass, like, woo. So in the morning, I was saying that it's very funny that when Branislav, as a Russian Marxist, Leninist, I was surprised that you are so good in chess, Wawan. And he was saying, no, but you know, chess is a game and thing. I said, no, chess is not a game. That chess is not
This is not a game. Did we lose you, Dadelifi?
Yeah, it seems to have gone offline. It doesn't appear on the active.
Kimang Walihulere, greetings, artist extraordinaire. Do you have a question, Kimang, or do you have a comment?
No, I'm just listening. Thanks.
Okay, we've missed you on these sessions. Good to have you. Ihubo, I think you had it.
Yes.
Pardon?
I wanted to add that what needs to be done is that we need to decolonize these institutions of propaganda, of indoctrination. And we could only do that. We cannot change a white jockey for a black jockey. We really, because we've been to this higher institution of learning, and we may find black lecturers, but they are doing the very same thing that the former uh, white lecturers are doing. They're just teaching false narratives. So what needs to happen is that we need to somehow come up with a way of bringing this knowledge, indigenous knowledge system to people, because some people don't really know really what's happening. They're just going there with the intention of learning, only to find years later that they've nothing. There are many doctors, scientists, and other people from different professions who could only present a certificate as a bachelor or a doctor of this and that, but they are not productive. They cannot produce even a single thing, not even a toothpick. They can't. But they are doctors. They are professors. They are this and that. So what we need to do is that we need to do everything and characterize everything uh, by means of Ubuntu. What I mean by that is that like we say in Essentials that I am because you are. So each one should teach one. I should be able to go out there and really teach other people through history and knowledge of our culture, not this indoctrination that we are given in our society and in some institution of our learning, because it serves no one any good. It only makes it worse, because people go to institutions of learning in hope that they will be truly educated, only to find that they have nothing. They really been taught nothing except that they are being indoctrinated. Currently, our system of learning is like a banking system, where a school teacher is perceived to know all, and the student is perceived to be ignorant, and the teacher then deposits his knowledge in the head of the student, and then takes it out in the form of writing a test to know whether the students understood what was being taught. We cannot allow that to happen, because we know that previously we used oral tradition and symbolic form of learning or teaching. So we should go back there. Why not? Why can't we go back there and really invest our energy and our time in trying to go back to these forms of tradition, notions of oral tradition in terms of learning and teaching. Thank you.
Thank you. But also, don't discredit those like Professor Mphako, who shared their methodologies, who's also in the, what Abdulcadir called it, the Center of, what is it? Center of Miseducation.
No, I'm not discrediting those who are trying to invest in really teaching through knowledge. Instead, I'm just discrediting those who are doctors, but they are not contributing positively in our society, but they are happy having a check and and then living in fancy houses, and but they are not really
All right.
contributing truly to our society.
All right. I'd like to hear from Phitika, Ntuli, and then Bridget. Yes.
Yes. I just sent something to you, my paper on the rebirth of Africa in the mirror of thought, which I think will be very, very good to read and for further discussion, because it encapsulates most of the stuff that you've been talking about today. But in conclusion, I say I used to teach in a primary school in Swaziland. I was teaching 9, 10-year-olds when a 13-year-old boy said, I want to study too. And then as he was in there, I asked him one day, I said, your father has got 67 head of cattle and he gives your brother 51 of them. How many are yours? Oh, the guy was very angry. He said, do you think my father is so stupid that he can give my younger brother, less head of cattle, than me? And then you know that actually in African mathematics, it's got ethics, it's got morality, it's got Ubuntu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ndade. There's so many interesting on the chat box there's so many interesting comments. I'm hoping everyone is getting a chance to read or is able to read the comments. Bridget, did you want to say something? And maybe I'll read a couple to close.
I just wanted to, I really feel very overwhelmed by and moved by the knowledge that is so apparent in the people who've been contributing today, and it's really touching. But I suppose that I really share Sponello's concern. How do we systematically change the education system so this knowledge starts to frame the paradigm of the education system? And I was wondering if, in a simple way, maybe one of the beginnings of that is in terms of language. So, for example, I put forward this notion of first system art rather than traditional African art, which is always the term that's used, but traditional always implies static or unchanging or tribal African art. And maybe if we talk about first system art and Western art, and then we understand that first system art started here in the Western Cape with the Blombos shells 70,000 years ago, where probably they were strandlopers or ancestors of strandlopers made little holes in the shells and then strung them into beads. And that was the first example of art anywhere in the world. And the first example of symbolic thinking, metaphoric thinking. And I feel so strongly that every school child in South Africa should know about this, should know that that's where art began and that art is the beginning of humanity. And so I'm just wondering, are there simple things that we can do in terms of changing labeling, making the beautiful, beautiful things, because those Blombo shells are here in the museum in Cape Town. How can we get them out so that every child in South Africa knows about them? Also here in Cape Town, we have the Leidenberg heads, the ceramic art from 750. When Sponello came to Cape Town for the first time, he saw them for the first time. It was such a pleasure to take him to see them. So are there simple things that we can do? We've tried, we've of education. I suppose there'll be another movement at some time, another fees must fall, another movement for decolonization, and curriculum will change again and deepen again. But in the meantime, what are the simple things that we can do to share the knowledge that is there, that is around us, that we can touch, see, and feel, and be inspired by? But how do we share it? It's such a it's a crime, really, that ignorance is taught in schools, and we have this around us. So that's my kind of closing question.
My closing thing. When I was in the University of Durban, Westville, we started an African Renaissance institute that worked with communities and so on. And the result of that, we the Ministry of Health in social study and creating a department of indigenous knowledge systems that are now being taught in the Northwest University, and I think Limpopo, and to a certain extent in Venda. And I know that there is a university in the Eastern Cape that has applied for a UNESCO chair in arts and culture, which will be the first one actually in the country, the power even to sit around and change the curriculum and then push forward, so that we don't do an outreach program of getting in to open up the boundaries between communities and people where there's a lot of indigenous knowledge that has not been contaminated by education. In conclusion, in my language, there are two types of educated people. Kunabantu abafundisiwe nabantu abafundile. If ufundisiwe, that means you have been taught by somebody else. They may have taught you some of the stuff you do not want, but ubufundile, that means you are based upon your own knowledge wherever else that you started. That's where the starting point that has got to be. I think, as artists, as poets, as writers, as all of these things need to come in far much more together if we are to redeem the lost spirituality of our country. Thank you.
Lafifi's
Professor Mphako,
Yeah.
Abdul.
No, I was saying Lafifi's in. Let him finish the chess player game.
His thoughts.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much, my brother. The story about this chess player thing was that this guy was explaining to him that, you see, each chess is based on hierarchy. At the top is the king and the queen that are the most powerful. And as a Marxist-Leninist who is thinking on a classless society, how can he put all his faculties in the defense of the king and the queen? And then when you look at our games that are classless, like Umrabarab, all the chips, they start equal and the game ends equal. And then when you look at it, draft too. Draft is very hierarchical too. You have, when you reach a certain area, then they crown the chip, and then it has more power. It can move all over around. Even the cards, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, king, queen, and ace, and things like that. So we have to go back to those games that induce in us this classlessness. Yeah, that's what the story was about. How do we create games? And it's very unfortunate that we haven't continued these new games. You don't even find new games in the phones, yeah, but so we need to instill the artists that are creators of games. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dada Lufifi. Professor Mphako, we're just taking closing statements from all of you right now. Is there anything you'd like to say, or should we say goodbye for today?
I think I'm going to say goodbye. I will send stuff on the chat.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This seems like such a short session. Hey? Today's sessions felt very short. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Thanks to Phitika and Ntuli, and congratulations again for your being awarded. Yay! I didn't hear anyone say congratulations.
Hey, congratulations.
No, they are jealous, and I work so hard for it. I thought when I come in here,
Siyabonga.
you'd even throw SMSs and tweeters of flowers to me.
Siyakubongela Mphemba.
I think a majority of them don't even know how to operate this thing. Maybe we'll try and throw it in on the side there. Thank you so much for being here today. Next week we'll have chatting about the work of Omar Bacha. So we're hoping you can join us. If you're not already subscribed onto our mailing list, drop us a line, even on the chat box right now, and we will subscribe you, or go to Art and Ubuntu Trust website on the very first page there, and you can add your contact emails and receive all newsletters. We only have 3 at Saturday sessions coming up: Omar Bacha, and we have Peter Clark, and then we have a last big conversations about jazz and a book launch on music. So please do join us, and don't forget to fill in the feedback form, please, on the chat on the side there. There's a form there, very short form. Let us know if these sessions have been helpful. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Nelisa. Thank Professor Mphako. Thank you, Professor Ntuli. Thank you, Ndadeli Fifitladi. Thank you, Ihubule Ngabati. And thanks to everybody that's here. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.